Good morning. We're still morning. Okay, I'm going to call the Committee of the Whole work session to order on this day, Tuesday, May 19th at 10:40. So on our agenda, we have the minutes from the previous meeting of our work session, April 21st. And then on our agenda today, we're going to discuss the expectations on collaboration with the Grand Marais on Sawtooth Bluff planning. Also in our packet, we have the minutes of the standing committees, information only, the Airport Advisory Commission, the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee, and the Highway Advisory Committee. Our next meeting is June 18th of 2026. So I'll open our discussion for the consideration and collaboration on the Sawtooth Bluff planning.
Madam Chair, before we open, if I may, Brady and I have a couple follow-up questions on the budget process that we would like to discuss at the end of the meeting if possible as well.
Okay. Good. Yes. Okay. Travis, would you like to
Sure, yeah,
begin?
I'll attempt to launch into it. So yeah, I mean, just to kind of bring you all up to speed, so I do have, I don't know, maybe you have it in your packets, we've got a couple of Gantt charts, one of them being the Sawtooth Bluff Regional Park designation and construction process. So if you look, we do have kind of that, starting at the top, we've got the county board decision on the Bluff feature. It took us a few months at the end of 2025. We're currently in the second phase of the Gantt chart and kind of looking for city council decision on contract assistance, as well as just kind of needing input from the commissioners as to what expectations from city is on the collaboration with the HKGI contract. To provide a little bit of context, it had been part of discussions with the city that it would be a collaborative effort in terms of funding the contract with whichever group we chose. So after receiving that decision at the end of 2025 from the county board, I took this kind of memo in February to the city council to get feedback as to, how they wanted to contribute financially and what involvement they wanted to have in the steering committee. To try to be brief, they did want to participate in the steering committee. However, there was a couple of different thoughts on financial contributions. The board or city council seemed a little bit split on that. Subsequently, there was some conversation between city administrator and county administrators.
Correct. Thank you, Mitch. So I meet with Mr. Administrator Roth every other month. And we had a discussion about the conversation that happened at the city council. And from his perspective, he thought it would be helpful if we had really clear direction from the county board on what our expectation is of the city. So for example, if we're asking for 50% contribution to the total cost, are we asking for less than that? The letter indicates 50% was kind of our starting point for the discussion. And so I think it's important for us to discuss, if they're not willing to provide 50%, what does that mean? And how does the board want us to proceed in discussions with them? So I had shared with Administrator Roth that we'd be happy to come back to the city council with a more finite recommendation from the county board on what we're expecting from the city.
So we'll open it up for discussion to kind of help sort this out so you can meet with city council next month perhaps.
And with that, Madam Chair, I have not talked about this specific date with Administrator Roth. The last time we had the discussion, we were anticipating sooner than now. It took us a little bit of time to get this before all of you, so I meet with him again tomorrow. So if we do have a direction, then we'll discuss if it's the next city council meeting or the meeting after that. But I do anticipate it will be in the near future.
So, Madam Chair, one of the things I think about when I look at this plan, I think it's very beneficial to community members of the city of Grand Marais, county residents as well, could potentially use this resource, and it could also be an opportunity for tourism. And given that, I think it's really important that we have a significant contribution by the city of Grand Marais, because I do see that residents as well as tourists who that would potentially stay in hotels or VRBOs or vacation rentals would be in the city of Grand Marais because of the proximity of the project. So I'd just like to open up with stating that on a personal level.
So where we've come so far is that it's going to be an outdoor type of activity at this piece of land, trails and no infrastructure, no big condos or that type of thing.
Yeah.
Purely outdoor
Well,
activity.
with this, contract with HKGI, we would suss that out. What exactly is it gonna be? There's, public engagement built into that, so we did have the 2016? Yeah, 2016 plan for Sawtooth Bluffs, that kind of spelled out generally what it might look like. But this would kind of, going through HKGI's process would give us a product that we could plug right into the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission application for a regional park process. And so through that, we identify exactly what it's going to be. It could include infrastructure, it could include trails, but how much and where, and if there's going to be a campground is all stuff we haven't identified yet.
So how would you determine a cost if we're going to go, let's say, 50-50 with the city
Yep.
council?
So this was previous to our discussions back in August of 2025. I did receive this approximate draft proposal from HKGI as to what it might cost to get us to the finish line. That was in the neighborhood of about $52,000 at that time. I have sought an update on that price from HKGI, assuming they're probably quite busy. They haven't quite gotten back to me with a new figure.
Okay.
And just to clarify, what we're talking about is just the cost for the HKGI, not the total cost
Yeah.
of, okay.
Yes.
And so we've budgeted 30,000 out of, for sure, at least 52, probably more at this point. And the city was sounding split on sharing that cost 50/50. I mean, should we ask them to contribute 30%, or, what is, I guess I didn't listen to it. I said I was gonna listen to it. Just to get the tone and that sort of thing.
Can I add one more piece of information that I think is important? And that's that when they had the discussion, there was a lot of discussion around the fact that we were using what we had identified as PILT funds for the project. And so some of the city council members, I think, had the understanding that that money was earmarked and could only be used for this project, which, as you all know, is not the case. So I think that's an important factor as well, because the discussion was, and help me fill in the blank here, but the discussion was really about the county has these funds set aside already, which we do. We have the 30,000 earmarked for it, but again, it's not, the PILT funds could be used for other designations as well. It's not earmarked specifically only for this project. So I think that's something that we can clear up when we go back to the city council as well, because I'm sure they have, different funding sources within their line items within their main budget that they could use for projects like this as well.
Just to add to that a little bit too, when we held that city council meeting back in February, Administrator Roth was not present. And his kind of institutional knowledge of what funds they have to operate with was not available. So, like I said, in previous discussions, there had always kind of been an understanding that there would be a collaborative effort, but it was kind of remained unknown as to if there was funds already set aside or where they were intended to be drawn from. We don't know. So.
Okay.
Well, personally, I feel, that the 50% is very reasonable, given what the benefit might be with whatever build-out might be suggested after public listening sessions. And PILT money certainly is used for a lot of things in our budget. I know we've talked with Firewise about the fact that that funding has been diminished, and PILT is an opportunity to maybe set aside some fundings for that purpose, which is a high priority, not only for the city of Grand Marais and protection, but for rural parts of the county. So I would stand that I would like to really look at that 50% number. With maybe a cap for us at 30,000. Maybe the cost has gone up a little over 52 at this point in time, but that's certainly a little more than 50% for us is fine, but to go with that allocation of 30,000.
Do you know what the new cost is?
No,
No.
I haven't been able to hear from HKGI yet. I reached out to them a couple of weeks ago, and they haven't provided a new figure.
That certainly is an important component to understand
Yeah. I mean,
overall cost.
the proposal was from August of 2025. I wouldn't anticipate a drastic change.
Did they give any indication when you approached them?
About a change?
Yeah, you're right, given the fact that it was August, that we would anticipate, but I don't see it being much. In other words, just a sense of it when you contact them to ask for an updated.
And I haven't heard back from them in any capacity, so
Okay.
no.
All right. Well, I guess what I would say is that the basis under which we would proceed, answering some of those fundamental questions is very important. And in my conversations with individuals, city council, that the perception is that, well, you've already got money, why do we have to pay any money? And so that's a different place of perception from when we initially looked at this way back when, that sure, we'd be willing to participate, and to where it is right now, where there's some concerns about whether or not we will contribute to it. I think just as our discussion in public health concluded relative to first call, tell me what it is you do, how you do it, and why we should go with you, and then we will make a commitment to provide the monies in order to establish that relationship. All the unknowns in this regard, if we're willing to say, are you willing to explore? We've got some general ideas. Commissioner Storley referenced, infrastructure, it's outdoor activities, but we say we haven't specified whether it's going to be infrastructure or not. It's just, there's multiple things, and multiple things came out of our initial discussions and surveys and whatever else. So there's a lot of unknowns, and if I remember the city council, I'd be asking the questions to want to know to the extent that I could clarify those unknowns. If to your point that we should let them know. I mean, PILT funds, we were looking at funding mechanisms, and to your point that Administrator Roth wasn't there, so he wasn't there to say, well, we could take it from here to explore where revenues would be, that it wouldn't impact, levy. So I guess if you're asking us, what do we go back to City Council with, one would be that give a clear explanation of how the board proceeded, looking at what our revenue sources might be, and because it falls within the purview of what PILT funds could be, that's where we said, but with the understanding, based upon previous conversations, that we be sharing this cost. And so qualifying our funding mechanism, but with an understanding that we'll call it a gentleman's, or whatever you want to call it, agreement, in principle. At this point, I would agree that if it's a partnership, it's a partnership. If you want to look at who owns the land and who's going to benefit in proximity and things, you look at the west end and you look at, where this is happening, I'd want to know that. I don't want my levy to be impacted by things that are constantly, providing benefit to the Grand Marais area. And the other thing is that, which, I don't know to the extent that you can speak to it, but our joint powers agreements with the city are anything but the model for how we should operate. And what that says is if we can't get our joint powers agreements operating right and updating it and a willingness to, it's if the reluctancy isn't a part that is facilitated by a commitment on both parties, then we find ourselves in a position where we have to take the initiative, because otherwise they're comfortable where they're at in these joint power agreements, letting them ride. And so if our previous experience says anything to us, it says, if this is going to be a joint power agreement, we need to clean up and make sure that we write some things in there that the accountability factor and the review factor is going to be based upon something that is very direct, very clear, very understandable. So we got two things. We seem to have a misunderstanding relative to will we share costs or not share costs. If they're asking, well, what are we going to do? We don't know that. So then that's the cart ahead of the horse relative to defining the particulars so that they can respond financially. And the other thing is we don't have, by experience, we haven't had really good experience relative to joint powers. So we'd be very clear on that component.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also think, and I appreciate Auditor Powers joining us at this point, because it might be helpful for the City Council to find out how those PILT funds, whether they're state or federal PILT funds, are spent here in the county, because they're used for a wide variety of things. As Commissioner Gamble mentioned, it replaces lost property tax revenues for everyone in the county, but it funds public safety operations, search and rescue in remote areas. Some of the funds are appropriated down to townships, local school districts, law enforcement, fire safety. So there are lots of ways that those funds are used, and I think this is an opportunity to perhaps educate not only the City Council, but residents of the City of Grand Marais of how those funds are used. And then after that understanding is reached, then addressed, what percentages or how we might divide up the costs of this particular piece. Right now at $30,000, we're looking at contributing to 57, almost 58% of the costs. And so I think that is useful information to go back to the city with, and then having Administrator Roth there to respond to some of their questions about their particular budget.
So to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, regarding the cost, you would propose that we would continue to pay the $30,000, and then anything above and beyond that would be the responsibility of the city?
Correct.
Well, okay, just to clarify.
Once we know the total, I mean, what we've heard from staff is that it was $52,000 back in 2025, and that we anticipate there might be an increase. We don't know that number, so within reason. If it's a significant increase, then I think we would need to come back to this board for discussion. Mm-hmm. Is that an accurate summary of what?
That's what
okay.
I was trying to say.
Yeah, and just the assumption is it'll be less than 60,000, so that they won't be paying more than 50%.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, just to clarify though.
And
because-
if thinking about just the reality of the world we're living in right now, they might have increase for gas costs coming up here to do some of the work, things like that. I would fully anticipate those additional costs.
Sure. So previously you said that you feel that it's entirely reasonable and fair to make it 50-50. And so
That was a general, what
Okay,
we
yeah,
have
just to
obligated
clarify.
in our budget is $30,000, which is literally 57, almost 58%.
yeah. So, I mean, from the standpoint of being clear, that if the board's consensus is that we feel we should share this cost, if we see the county as being deeper pockets than the city, and we say our commitment is 30, so anything above that would be your commitment, and it's probably not going to be a 50-50, which addresses the issue that the county
Yeah.
with the deeper pockets is willing to commit the 30, but we'd like to see you commit, and because it primarily is your area that's going to benefit on this, that's how I guess I would represent that. But the questions that to be answered, I believe, if I were sitting on the city council, is we need to make a commitment, which the county board made a commitment to contribute $30,000 to define what in fact we want. Because this is something that began way back when, and things have changed in the interim. Therefore, we need to get clarity on what this is going to be, and that clarity will come to us through a proposed committee that would be comprised of these people. So where we're at, if we are aligning these things, is saying we need to make a commitment to define what it is we want, and it's going to cost us this, and this is what we think that shared cost should be. And then, under the basis of what we determine, we need to have a commitment to have a joint powers agreement that defines specifically responsibilities, roles, and how we build accountability and updating into this moving forward. So I think we need to outline the things that need to be addressed and then address it with them.
Well, and just to clarify with you, Gary, so our memo as staff kind of requested that we engage in planning process with steering committee, so appointed members from city, county, Grand Portage, others to be determined, and then through the process of working with HKGI, hoping to come out of the end of that with a joint powers agreement. So that would kind of, we're approaching this in good faith with, appointed membership, hopefully coming out with a joint powers agreement we can all agree to.
And the other thing is, if we say whoever instigates the conversation or initiates it, it's if we say, I've got this idea, and just an example, if I decide that I want to build a fence around my yard because I'm going to get a puppy, the neighbor, I'm just saying, hey, I'm thinking of building a fence and just wanted to let you know, and hey, I'd like a fence too, so I'm willing to share that cost with you. But if you don't have that shared value, you make that decision independent of any other outside resource. And in this case, the overall big picture of pursuit of something needs to be a shared value that has to be ratified by the city council to agree, both financially and from an ongoing maintenance standpoint. And feedback I get is that the county is weary of the volunteerism that's required to maintain trails and infrastructure. And if we want to look at our experience in an idea relative to the YMCA, that did not shake out well. And the county's responsibility, they have benefited from the fact that they've stood their ground. They said, this is it. We aren't going to contribute anymore. And yet we continue to pay. It is not a partnership. But I don't know, Commissioner Starley, do you know people in your community? And if Commissioner White here, I'd say how many of them are participating with memberships in the Y?
Oh, quite a few.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay,
Just 2 new members last month.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just
It's
saying that
ongoing.
we see the benefit.
Yes.
Because
Oh,
we're
yes.
accused of a lot of times of
I know.
self-serving, and so to the extent that the facts represent differently, then that helps inform decisions.
Just to speak to that a little bit too, I mean, you covered a lot, but I think it's an important distinction that one, the entirety of the proposed Sawtooth Bluff property is within city limits, so whatever happens there is city jurisdiction. So we'd have to go through their planning process for that. Additionally, in terms of land area, it's about 50-50 county land and city land, and so I think that's just relevant to the conversation. Let's see, where else was I gonna go with that? Yeah, and then kind of relative to what's intended for the property. I mean, it has always been a part of the discussion that, we need to identify operation and maintenance through this planning process about what can we bite off and be very clear about what expectations are from both entities, with the another important distinction being that, there will be user groups that will be approaching Joint Powers Board for Sawtooth Bluffs to kind of pitch whatever plans they would like to have. And so, like, they're going to be the ones spearheading the effort. We're going to be sitting back and acting as fiscal agents. I mean, unless, again, there's infrastructure that we identify that we can maintain, but that's just kind of, I felt relevant. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to the conversation, just to step back just a little bit, because we kind of dived into the deep end right away. And for any of the listening public, I just wanted to kind of provide just a larger scope that what is being proposed is to update the existing Bluffs plan. And in that original plan, we do see elements that have been built out since then. So the dog park is an item that was initially conceived in that original plan, as well as the Gunflint View apartments. So in a way, this is a plan that has been in motion and has been taking some action. I think the dog park is just like a really wonderful example of something that benefits the community, and is being well stewarded by the volunteers that have, initiated that. And with this plan element, if anyone is curious, in this packet is the original HKGI document that does set the expectations of what this plan would be. And as we talked a lot about last year, there's going to be public engagement to talk about what is wanted. We had a lot of conversations in 2025 about what activities specifically people would or would not want to see. And that would really be crystallized through this next process with HKGI to finalize and update this plan. So I see from my perspective that the update to this plan will not only get that updated Cook County, Grand Marais citizen feedback to really make sure we're on the right track with what activities specifically and what infrastructure that site could sustain reasonably and sustainably, but also unlock the funding mechanisms with this new designation. It's basically what kind of started all this was that the original plan it's not checking the boxes to be eligible for certain funding mechanisms in the state. And so this would allow the updated plan to be able to access those funding mechanisms. So, for anyone's, I hope that's helpful, just to provide a little bit more context. So, thank you.
The funding mechanism being legacy dollars.
Yeah, Greater Minnesota's.
Yeah.
legacy.
And as we discussed before, I mean, when you're looking at granting funds from a funding source, you are looking at it based upon the established criteria that matters most to that providing entity, that funding entity. And in this case, that funding from legacy funds, it has to have a regional impact, which means that regionally it has to attract tourists. That's what it says in their language. So if we're going to give money to you out of a funding source that is regional, then you're going to have a regional return on our investment. And that means that it has to benefit people outside of your county, as well as people within your county. But that's another component of evaluation from the standpoint of, it seems that there's an awful lot that is proposed in requests for dollars, sometimes grant, often it's levy dollars in order to feed tourism. And we have a funding mechanism that is significant when it comes to funding tourism. And I, as a commissioner, representative constituents, believe that there needs to be a discipline in that evaluation process is yes, tourism important, but at what cost overall? So the evaluation needs to be something. We see it in how our residential homes are being bought up. There's a number of things that are being impacted by tourism. So, and it's not unique to Cook County, but it means that we have to have an honest discussion of how much is good and how much is not good. That needs to be an honest discussion. We don't want it to be perceived that that we come out with winners and losers. We have to come out with a balance between what we as a community provide for the whole of our community. And I think that there needs to be an honest discussion. So why I say that is that if in the presentation requesting these dollars is saying, we need this for tourism, how often do things come and say, we need this for tourism? And I'm saying, let's put it in the context of the big picture of how much is tourism driving decision-making without the context of how it impacts and the ripple effect in our community as a whole.
One of the benefits I always see in my end is the development of the Gitchigami Bike Trail. It isn't just tourists, it's locals out there with their families and rollerblading and that type of thing, or getting from one spot to the other to work, which has really been helpful in Tofty for the folks there. My question would be, what if we do nothing with that land? It's beautiful land. We see it from many angles going up and coming down.
It'd be like preserve the Bluff.
I think that will come out when there is discussion and we have people involved from the community providing their input. That's the key piece that is so critical to the project, is the public input.
And we did have that, and we had mixed comments about that. If Travis can remember, some of the comments were, go for it, and we want to have, we as a community want to see something developed, and others just let it be.
Yeah.
And by moving forward with this proposal, we're not committed to developing the land.
No.
It would just, to your point, Commissioner, be a step forward to gather the information, engage again with the community to get feedback, and then determine, do we develop anything or do we leave the land?
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, though, just caution, is that it's going to be whose voice we choose to listen to. And while we say that we have community participation, I can tell you that in the process for the YMCA, sitting in on those meetings, the vested interest groups drove the decisions. And what was uncomfortable with me was that it was like we didn't want to listen to the other group because we wanted to be the first at the table and we wanted to be sure that we got what we want. And I think that if everybody comes to the table with that broad perspective of being community informed and being willing to let go of what is self-serving in nature, in other words, I want this, and if I can use these revenues to get it, I want to be on that committee. And that's where I'm saying leadership and the basis under which that discussion needs to be taken place has to be weighted in such a way where it respects the collective voice.
I think the user groups are going to have a huge impact in how that land would be used, so that would be a very strong voice. You aren't going to have the tourists saying, we want to come up and use your land. They're not going to be here mostly. So we're going to have the user people saying, this is a piece of land that we see for whatever, hiking, biking, whatever.
And I think when you look at the survey results that was taken way back when, that there was a lot of it that was informed from people outside of the county. So I'm just saying, when you look at that, you can look at what is county informed, and that has a different perspective than those that are saying, well, gee, if we want to add this up there, that'd be great, but we have to understand who are stewards and who's paying for it, so.
Yeah, the HKGI when they worked with the city before, had that differentiation in the survey. It's
Yeah.
like, are you a resident? Are
Yeah.
you a visitor? I think
Yeah.
it is really important.
Yeah.
I was looking for the language for the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails, and I know it needs to have regional significance, but I didn't know it needed to have regional tourism draw. Maybe that's just implied, or maybe that's specified.
Yeah, I think I have it in the document that I
It's
drafted,
specified.
so I could give you the
Because,
specific
I
on
mean,
it.
anything we do is gonna benefit visitors, like, in the whole community, you know?
True.
But I absolutely wanna focus on what benefits our community.
Yeah,
so.
and what I'm saying is that this is where the evidence-based component comes in, where we can stand confidently behind the information, the research that backs our decision that we're supporting. And if the loudest voice becomes, not that,
Yeah.
and our responsibility is to respectfully just say, let's make sure that we build integrity into process, so.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
So since you're going to be meeting with them tomorrow, what kind of bullet points do we want to send with you?
Well, let me summarize, if that's
Yes.
all right, what I think I've heard to make sure that we've got the plan moving forward. So what I've heard is that when we present to the city, it's going to be really important to explain what the PILT dollars can be and what they have been used for in the, go ahead.
I feel like that's even tangential to the, like, I don't understand how the city was concerned on how we were paying for it. Like, I feel like they should just be concerned if they want to participate. So I feel like that's almost just
I think-
skirting
Education.
around. Well, I don't know if we need to address that directly. Maybe we do, just to clear it
I
up.
would just
but
indicate that PILT isn't used just for this. Here
Yeah.
are the ways we
It
use
just so
PILT.
happens, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but,
just a
but
stream.
also I would say that, to Mitch's comment, that Administrator Roth wasn't there,
Right,
so he couldn't
exactly.
identify similar funding things, so I think it is an important element.
Okay.
But I think it needs to be represented in a way where, again, we're not trying to us versus them.
Right.
We're trying to partnership and understanding how we might go about this. So the county, when it came to us, we had to look at funds that we did not want to be, levy derived. And therefore, we looked at this, which has multiple applications, which is an assessment of priority. But you might as well, in respect to the fact that your administrator wasn't here, maybe you could look at those funds. But the board does feel that it should be a shared cost. And, yeah.
And I think how I can address that is in a conversation with Administrator Roth to make sure that there's understanding, and that I can share the details and get kind of more in the weeds with him about
Sure.
that, and then keep it broader for the board, keeping it higher level about those funds, if that's agreeable. I think one of the most important next steps is to get the contract number updated.
Yep.
Because I would like to have that before we go to the city council. And then recommend that from this body, that we would pay the $30,000 towards the total cost. And they would pay the remainder if it's under 60. If it's over 60, then I think we need to pause that discussion and come back before all of you to have further discussion about it. And then I know this isn't something that needs to be addressed at this meeting or at this city council meeting, but making sure that when we have the joint powers agreement, per your recommendation, that we have a very strong contract and joint powers agreement about what the operations are going to look like, what the ongoing tails are, ongoing costs are for both the county and the city as we move forward.
And there's, in my mind, there's maybe two different, or maybe there's not two different joint powers agreements, but one for the steering committee and then one down the road for a
Right.
potential
Yep.
park, right? Okay.
Yep. Did I miss anything?
I would just say, how this conversation is couched, is that there was an initiative back in da-da-da-da-da. At that time, if I'm correct in that regard, it was a partnership between the city and other vested interests. So you look at all the stakeholders involved in this, and we're just bringing it up because the funding mechanism that is in place and the opportunity we have here. But we also want to be realistic about ongoing costs that won't be funded through operational grants.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's-
and so we're having that conversation. We are not trying to drive anything other than follow the stewardship on something that had been approached before. If you look at, and I'm just saying this by way of information example, that when the highway department was going to address Wisconsin Avenue, and the city's saying, well, wait a minute, that's in our jurisdiction, how come you never talked to us about it? So we're having a conversation up front, and we want it to be seen as a partnership, which is mutual respect and regard for both parties.
Absolutely. Okay. Do we need anything
I
else?
was kind of wondering if it would be useful, since we have Brady here too, to describe, I mean, so we're talking about PILT funds, and there's a specific portion of that which is dedicated to recreation, correct?
The state, we have both state and federal.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that. The federal portion was part of tax forfeit funds,
Okay.
which we don't expect to see much of that in the future because of the change in tax forfeit.
Yeah.
But the history of it includes a lot of those funds also. But yeah, there's 35,000 that can be used for that, but it also can be used for levy reduction. It's our choice.
But 35 per year?
We have, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's what's in current statute.
Sure.
But that's a policy decision the board makes
Yeah.
to use that. It's not,
Rather than levy reduction.
Right.
Correct. The other thing I would say is that, and I keep bringing this up, but it puzzles me, and I don't know if we have an attorney's opinion on this or not, but the monies that come through the lodging tax, if that is for tourism and to promote tourism, anything that is connected, especially when it is proposed on the basis that this benefits tourism credibly, why we can't allocate dollars towards anything that's tourism related?
Yeah, because statutory, it's pretty specific in that law. It's to fund a tourism bureau to promote the area.
Yeah.
It might be worth a conversation.
I would like to
No,
see us the
it's-
statute on that and
Yeah.
read that.
Sure, I can provide that, but, I mean, it's a good discussion for the legislature.
Well, I agree, and I think when we had a discussion today about something, and it's like, say, the context in which we operate, when we often say that, well, what's statute or what's our policy that limits the context in which this conversation happens? And if we find out that there are structures that are inhibiting our ability to do things, we need to respectfully address those and change it.
And for example, we added a 1% tax, but that was a special law that they
Yeah.
wrote for Cook County, and it allowed spending on
Yeah.
events. That's
Yeah.
why it's called the Events and Visitors Bureau. So they're open to things like that, but I
Yeah.
don't know about the
Yeah, we
original
really need
3%
to-
would be a little tougher.
And what I was gonna say is I think that's a great thing to look into, and worth having a conversation with Linda about, is, let's say it is over 60,000 and the city is like, no, we're not gonna, maybe Visit Cook County would be willing to contribute.
In the context of what
this.
we can do, but now with the golf course thing on the horizon, I mean, if that's $160,000 right there that is freed up, and now we can hire more people, and we can do more promotion for tourism, I'm just saying,
It'd be nice if we go to projects.
yeah.
yes, and I can certainly have that discussion with the executive director of Visit Cook County and ask, because per Brady's point, I mean, the statute specifies that funding needs to go to the chamber in Visit Cook County. However, how they spend it, I don't know that the statute clarifies once the funds are within, so I think they have some flexibility.
It's a one-page on this whole thing.
Yeah,
The basic statute.
but I think if we're gonna have that conversation, we need to know the basis, the foundation on which that conversation can happen. So without clarifying with specificity, we we better wait till we know and then say, would be, could we? Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you all for your time on this subject. It's definitely been a project that is decades old. And, you know, Mitch and I now working together on this, it's definitely, we're looking for guidance and vision to the point of, you know, the do-nothing scenario. There is a full spectrum of things here, and our jobs are to facilitate the process, and this is the process that's been laid out before us. And so, you know, going to the city, now coming back here, potentially back to this, you know, it's like a little bit of ping pong once in a while, and that's what group projects are. We all have been a part of that in our lives, but we just appreciate the time that you've given this, and we're appreciative of the clarity. This feels consistent with how Mitch and I proposed this to the city back in February, and so I hope that that will reinforce the wanting of a partnership for this project. So, thank you.
And I think the two things, you know, as far as the expectation that we as a board need to understand is what is the city's position on this overall, and what are they willing to commit financially, not only initially, but ongoing.
Yeah. Anecdotally, we were informed going into this process that the city was hesitant about contributing too much staff time and too much like actual participation,
Yeah.
and was more comfortable with the financial aspects.
Yeah.
But because the administrator wasn't there and he couldn't identify a specific
Yeah.
funding source, that's where the hesitancy felt originated.
Madam Chair, before we lose you today, is there any chance that you could provide a quick update on the budget shop hours?
Oh, yes. So the budget shop will be opening on Saturdays again. We were able to reconfigure some staffing arrangements between our recycle center assistants and our budget shop attendant. So we will be reopening the budget shop. I believe it's the 9 to 1, but we'll have a news release going out for that. So the public is welcome to visit the Cook County website to see that news release and participate in the budget shop. It's a wonderful community resource.
Good. Okay.
Can you tell me, it's crazy that I have to ask this question, but the revenues that are generated, where do they go?
Well, Auditor Powers, although I have familiarized myself with the land services budget, I believe it goes in our
It's in your
budget. It's in our budget. It pays for the staffing that happens there, but.
Does it pay for the staffing?
I mean, I
Well,
probably
not
not.
towards-
fully-
towards-
Part towards
Yeah.
it,
Yeah,
yes.
okay,
It's
all
not
right.
that high of
Similar
revenue.
recycling.
That is such a great community
Yes.
resource.
Twice.
Oh, my gosh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was there
Thank you.
anything else?
Well, I just wanted to, after
Oh, sure.
I touched base with Mitch yesterday, finally. We had some challenges connecting, but just regarding the CJ Ramstead ATV trail and how to navigate that, and you know, Mitch is part-time as our Parks and Trails coordinator, and so his capacity is limited into how much he can do, and is maybe doing more than he should have, which doesn't surprise me, knowing him. But then it sounded like we were kind of waiting on the ATV club. You know, there's been changes there, and so I reached out.
And on our user groups too, because we haven't heard back from all our user groups.
Well, yes. In particular, I was just thinking about what this means if we talk to the state, what it means for our community, what our options are, where do we as a county board fit into the process, where does our community fit into the process. And so then I reached out to the ATV club and just said that I touched base with Mitch, and that it was our understanding that we're kind of waiting on the user group to bring this forward. And just as an update, they have their 501(c) status. I don't know if that's different, if that had fallen through the cracks before, but I think just trying to show that they're for real. They had membership drive last Friday. Things are looking well for the club, I guess, and now they're working on trail maintenance, having a meeting with the DNR grant and aid program. But I guess the fires have taken a toll on just staffing at the DNR right now. So I don't know if they're gonna touch base with the state and then get back to us until I was hoping to bring the DNR here kind of ahead of time, just to learn, like, what does this mean? But that's not been the easiest thing either, so, just wanted to touch base with the board and see if there were further thoughts or expectations, or strategy.
If I may add, we've been trying to work on formalizing more of a policy and procedure for how user groups can expect to interact and how to get to the board's attention. So I envision it similar to how, like, we have conditional use permits go to the planning commission. Planning commission gathers information, sees whether or not it's relevant to our current existing plans and policies and goals, and then they would make a recommendation to you guys. Only in this case, instead of a planning commission, it's a Parks and Trails committee. So we've got that in writing now, as well as like a little very simple form about how the user group should fill that out and submit it to Mitch. And so essentially, if a user group wants to approach the county board for action, they would submit this form to Mitch. Kind of describes what type of request is it. Obviously, there's a variety. Mitch would kind of verify all the details, collect what information he might need, forward that over to the Parks and Trails Committee. Parks and Trails Committee would review that request and speak with the user group and answer a lot of the questions, save you guys a lot of time, hopefully, and energy in thinking through the quirky questions that come up, and also review that plan relative to our greater planning documents for the county. And then the Parks and Trails Committee would make a recommendation to you, and Mitch would bring that to you at a following county board meeting. And so that's the kind of framework and structure, so that hopefully we can have all these user groups have a consistent experience at the county.
Right. I think too, kind of a desire for transparency and providing venues for folks who might oppose such things to be aware it's coming down the pipe and to provide comment. I know that it's not similar in a planning commission in that we don't notify neighbors about things that are happening, but just to try to get the word out there as soon as possible so that it doesn't appear, like we're fast tracking anything. And because we had quite a few, folks that felt like they were not a part of the process, and so just trying to avoid that.
Yeah, I really appreciate the formalizing of the process. I feel like we did a lot of that, but just it's very good to have it now as a formal process. I feel like we're going to be doing it will almost be a redo for the ATV club. It's how it's feeling, but if that's what it takes to have a better process, then I think that's really good.
Yeah, back to the Sawtooth Bluffs, one other point that I did bring up that should be clarified is that I think coming out of that city council meeting, one of the concerns was that they didn't want to have competition for legacy dollars when they're looking for dollars for their park. And so if they're going to prioritize, where they'd like to see dollars, it would be their park would take priority. Because that's significant for them. So whether or not those that administer the legacy funds could address that issue about competition or not, we should do that, because if it becomes an encumbrance to discussion, answer it. And if it's on the merits and not based upon, we got to divvy it up amongst multiple whatever, then we should know that.
And then if I may go back to the process that Neva just outlined, because we didn't hear full support from all of the user groups or heard no comment, I believe, from one of them, I do support this going through that process so that we can ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard, that we have a recommendation from the Parks Committee, and then bring it forward to the board if the board supports that approach.
I think that's great. Is there anything that indicates into there the merits under which it gets evaluated?
Yes, and with that, I want to be clear that the Parks and Trails Committee isn't holding a public hearing, quote unquote. It's not that type of body, but they are an open meeting, and they are still subject to open meeting law. So we should, keep in mind that the public is, we have that transparency because this is an online meeting and it's recorded and all of that. There's minutes. In the Parks and Trails Committee, the elements that they're looking at is the compatibility with the existing Parks and Trails plan. This is the community-adopted comprehensive plan for trails in the county. So this is, okay, here's a proposal. Is this aligned with this document that we have all already agreed to? And that's where we might have, people might be opposed to something, but the project might meet that. So that's where it's really good to identify those things and talk through that a little bit. If there's concerns that can be addressed through that process, that's healthy. And then also that, operations and maintenance question that comes up in every single project. What is this user group's plan? Build it and assume it will take care of itself, or what is that process? So answering those kind of key questions is front and center for this process.
That's good.
Okay, anything else? If you think of something else, you can let Administrator Dribble know before noon tomorrow.
Yep.
Whatever.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have no other discussions, so.
We do have one other item, and that's
Okay.
regarding the budget process.
Oh,
If
okay.
that's okay, Madam Chair?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Brady and I, Auditor Powers and I met yesterday and talked through our budget process for this year. So just kind of walk through it, and then we have a couple questions just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're headed in the right direction as we move forward. So the first is that we plan to provide direction to our department directors, which will include budget guidelines that we have prepared. My understanding is budget guidelines were prepared for 2026, and so we've updated that with some additional information so that the directors know exactly what we're looking for with the budget proposals. We have a template for them to use, same template as last year, that outlines the changes from this year to the next year and the reason for those changes in their budget. An outline letter that explains the timelines and our expectations for the directors. And then we haven't talked about this, but this is something that I was thinking about last night, is just to schedule an open hour for Brady and I for any directors to attend and ask questions about the budget if they're seeking any assistance. And I know that Auditor Powers is always willing to meet with them, as am I, to answer any questions, but just creating that space for them. So that's our plan for the department directors. The offices, our county attorney and sheriff have gone through the same process in the past, and so as long as they're willing to do that, I don't anticipate any changes for them as well, but we haven't had those discussions yet. Okay, any questions on the departments? Okay, so then our non-mandated, we have a letter going out to them as well, kind of outlining the process. Auditor Powers had sent an application last year that they need to complete and fill out for their budget requests as well, and so we're recommending the same process as last year with that application. We're identifying the non-mandated as the EDA, the HRA, the Historical Societies, and Soil and Water. So those would be the 4 agencies that we would request that they complete this application. And then we have kind of an other category that we're trying to determine how to address, and that's where we've got some questions, which would be our airport, the community center and extension, the Parks Department, the PHHS grants, and then we also have a question about the hub, because that has always, or at least in the last few years, has been part of the PHHS grants. But I know the board has had some discussion about how to address the hub. So before we get to that category, let me just walk through 2 other pieces. The fire departments. So we talked about the fire department when we had the recommendation from Lutz and Fire for their truck about changing their process slightly this year, where we ask about their equipment schedules. So Auditor Powers has developed a letter for them asking for some specific information in their budget request. And then we have 2 agencies that are under joint power agreements, which are the library and the YMCA. So just trying to kind of figure out how to move these different pieces forward. Before we open it up to all of you, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything, Auditor Powers.
I don't think so. So, yeah, and just from my perspective, we've listed things like the airport, YMCA, library, because they're not mandated. I think it's just a perspective, but it's not really something that you would do in a regular budget process and treat them like other entities. They're established. Those are different processes to change those things. Those are joint powers agreements that you have to engage in that. You're not going to change anything they do by a budget letter, for example. That's my perspective anyway. The airport, yes, you don't have to have an airport, but that would be a long process if you decided you wanted to change that.
And to be clear, we would
So-
still ask for their budgets.
Sure, you're going to get their budget, but I'm saying a process, like you're putting through the non-mandated, are you going to fund them or not, and to what level or not? These others are really county departments, if you will, and a different kind of structure for looking at those changes as opposed to a department.
Will this be presented this afternoon at the budget meeting, or no?
We
Don't
don't
have
have
Is
a
there-
budget meeting
budget.
next week.
Yeah.
Next week?
Next week.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's.
I was ready for today.
Oh.
Yay, then I really will be ready for next week.
Personnel.
So,
We can,
yeah.
to answer your question.
okay.
But we
Maybe.
would like to get these letters out per our calendar, and just to make sure that people have adequate time to start working on their budget. So we could postpone until next week if that's what you would like us to do, but we were hoping for feedback today if
Oh, no,
possible.
From my standpoint, I refer to the umbrella under which, we as a county do business, we'll say, provide services, whatever. If we take, things that you've referenced here and you put them under that umbrella, I would like to see, for instance, if you look at the YMCA, the airport, the hub, all of these different things, I'd like to see the things as they are broken out into the categories and with the dollars associated right now where we're at with them. So if we look at mandated, if we look at the items that you referenced, these ones that go through, okay, voice is going, you're all gonna benefit. Anyway, that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the umbrella with these categories that you addressed,
Yeah.
with dollars associated.
So you want their full budget, the budget for each one of these agencies, which we
I just
have
wanna
in our
see the
last.
dollar.
Yeah, we've,
Yeah, I'd like to see, so when it comes to, we hear that we've got to do more with less, but if we don't know what it is we're doing and what it's costing us, how do you make that determination? So it's a matter of evaluating priority. And the only way you can do that is see costs associated with the entity.
And we will do that as part of the budget process. We can show last year's costs and in comparison to their requests for the next year. But my question really is, do you want some of these others, the airport, community center, park, hub, to go through an application process? Or do we have them move forward with their budget requests like we have in the past, where they submit that to Auditor Powers? We could ask them to present their budget if that's something that you want additional information, but we just are really seeking clarity before these letters go out so that we understand
Yeah.
what you want, and it's not our decision, it's the board's decision.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I feel that the letters are preceding the evaluation. So if I were to evaluate, then I'd say this is the process I think we should use based upon that evaluation. Obviously, looking at budgets is important from the fiscal standpoint. I want to be informed, how did they approach their budget? Let's just take the library as an example, because I referred to it because it has a drafted in the agreement in the joint powers, 5% increase. How often have we looked at the library budget to determine whether that 5% is justified by an analysis, or it's simply because it's in there, let's just put it in there. Let's work with that increase of 5% each year. And if we don't evaluate it, we don't know. It's driven more by the joint powers definition than it is driven by evidence-based
Yeah.
analysis of expenditure. And that plays out over everything.
And it is, absolutely. I mean, it's driven by the joint powers agreement. And so in order to make any changes to their budget requests, we would need to address that through the joint powers agreement, correct?
Yes, but we can ask for, even in that joint powers, you can say, yeah, but we want to discuss it.
That's right, because the
Yep.
provision is that
Yeah.
unless the board says no, well, how do we know whether to say yes or no if we never look at it?
So it could be that they're on the list to make a presentation
Yeah,
every year.
yeah. Justify why.
Yeah, that would be one
The
option.
library goes to the city for that, and
Yeah.
I guess I don't know why it hasn't been with the county for a number of
They-
years now.
they
I think
have.
we need to
They
be
just-
consistent.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to come
Yep.
to the county board.
Yeah.
And with that consistency, I think the airport isn't any different than the EDA or the HRA. If we get into an extremely tight budget situation, we're gonna have to sit down and do a force matrix. This is more important than this,
That's
and here's
exactly
why.
right.
It's a little bit different.
You know?
I think there's entanglements with millions of federal dollars
Well,
we've
there are.
taken, and I don't think you can just abandon it.
No, I
For
don't think you
example,
can abandon
Well,
it.
you can abandon the HRA and the EDA pretty easily, but an airport's a different animal.
Right.
Well, thank you, Brady.
So what I'm hearing is, we want a presentation from the two organizations that we have joint powers with, the library and YMCA. Is that
Mhm.
accurate?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that'd be great. It's always.
It
Yep.
used to be that we regularly had presentations at committee of the whole, and groups came and presented. Every month there was a presentation.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm confused about the first tier there, EDA, HRA. What was that, historical?
Soil and water
Soil and
and-
water. It's an application? Is that just like the
Correct.
departments? Is that?
No.
Can you walk through it?
I
Or
don't-
here, let me find it.
No,
Take a
that's
step.
that's a question, because I think they're gonna look at it, they haven't done that before.
Yeah.
And they're gonna go, what?
Right,
Why am I doing this?
sure.
So they'll need an explanation.
And why
Well,
are they doing it?
I know I have talked to the Historical Society
Well, they
when
understand.
things were looking
Yeah.
really bleak, starting in January. I said, don't don't count on anything. You know, we have an unfolding budget situation, so I know they are aware.
HRA and EDA will
And they-
be different,
Mhm.
because they've not gone through
Right.
an application process of any kind. We created the HRA, and we created the EDA.
Mhm.
They're not outside entities coming here. We created them for certain purposes. So, they're gonna, part of the application is, what do you do, why are you doing this, who are you serving? Well, we created them, we told them what to do, basically. So, I mean, it's gonna be a different kind of letter and different kind of understanding. I just don't wanna send them the same thing you send Historical Society, et cetera. It's different.
So I've pulled up the application, and we haven't redrafted this.
No.
We will do that once we have
Yeah.
direction from all of you. But basically, it's just completing a summary page with the name of the organization, address, the services they provide, just a high-level overview, the amount of funding they're requesting, population served, and then it goes into a category of different questions. So organization information, a summary of the organization's mission goals, programming areas, how do they collaborate with others in the community, what are their funding strategy, potential conflicts, intended use for requested county funds, and then it has a list of about 6 different questions related to the requested use of the funds. So any challenges that they may have currently, the measuring the impact of the activities that they provide, and then some detailed financial information. So I don't know that
Yeah.
application is really the best term for it. It's more a way of gathering specific information
I
from one
would
of the
agree.
It seems
agencies.
very reasonable.
Yeah.
I would agree, but, yeah, I think from an assessment standpoint, on the part of, administration and commissioners, that when we do an assessment, then we establish the criteria under which we want to assess the various elements that we're looking at, whether it's mandated, not mandated, or this or that or the other joint power. But in doing that assessment, then we inform the process.
So,
My sense of it, and if I'm wrong on this, then I can clarify, but it seemed like we're making some movement in a direction, but it's almost like we're ratifying something without that assessment that prioritizes.
I guess in my perspective, having them present their budgets before all of you is the assessment process. If we give them questions ahead of time that say, we want you to be prepared to present and speak to this, and this, just based on some of the discussions and the themes that
Sure.
have come out of our budget discussions with the board, then your role as commissioners is to assess the budget presentations and determine what you want to fund as we go into 2027. So maybe I'm missing.
Well, no, I would say when it comes to department heads, establish framework of what we need and what's in many cases mandated, then that's different process. Theoretically could be different than the process that comes with somebody like the YMCA at the Historical Society, or from violence prevention. In other words, these are different groups, and some things we're required to, and that evaluation of budget and presentation, yes, that's important. And the letter that goes out that informs, some counties will say, well, looking at the budget and the cutbacks and this and that, the other thing, this is what we're saying. So be aware of that going in. And that might include that we want to see a reduction in your ask, and we want to freeze, hiring or whatever else. But that comes through an evaluation, and then that evaluation informs the ask when you go to departments. But when I was in the Arrowhead Corrections meeting, not the one that you attended, but the one previously, then the chair, St. Louis County, was just saying that we've got to, I want to see our board take a look at all of the mandated and non-mandated and do an assessment, and we can't go into this budget cycle this year and have the levy that we had this year. And I am trying to stay on top of that. And I hear her say that, and I said, that to me resonates. That's what we need to do. And so, I don't know.
I'm kind of hearing that's what we're doing. We're
I
asking
would-
people to present to us in the paperwork that you're sending out. We'll get that. And then before us, they'll come, we'll choose which ones, if we want all of them or whatever. Then we have the final assessment of the importance of a group or whatever. So that's what we're doing. Am I missing something?
Yeah,
Oh,
let's just say that
okay.
the non-mandated, that, so we have this process that we're gonna send out evaluation, and Plowman referenced it today, recommending we not go below the $150,000. Well, we haven't even done any evaluation of those entities, and so if we're gonna send it out there, it's the same old, same old. Then when we come to the nitty-gritty of trying to evaluate it, it's towards the end of the budget cycle. We say it'd be too unfair to tell them no at this point. So at what point is that evaluation done before it gets to the end where we feel we can't do it?
So I will say that I think we're starting we historically and now are starting the budget process a lot sooner than a lot of counties. So I think there's that it's May and we're starting this process, and the final determination isn't for several months.
Right.
We are including in the letter that the intent of the letter is to make sure that agencies know that their budget will be analyzed and that it may not remain the same, that the board has the ability to change the funding. So I think we're addressing that by the letter and by having them come and present to the board. So if you have recommendations on, that's why we wanted to have the discussion today, is if there are recommendations on other ways that we could or should approach this, we're open to that, but we really are seeking that direction from you,
Yeah.
because our intent at this point is, from what we've heard from all of you, to move forward with the letters, to move forward with a workshop where we have the presentations, and then plenty of time following the workshop for that decision-making process to happen.
Yeah. I think it would be healthy for us to put together an objective or a definition of budget process. In other words, what is it that we want to focus on? And in the evidence-based budgeting course that I took, that was fundamental, and they gave examples of states, and counties, and how you work together to do this definition. And part of it was saying that as you took the course, you needed to do that. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that independent of a discussion with the full board. But that is important, because what it does is it focuses on the things similar when we talk about negotiating contracts. We need to have things that keep us on the track when we're going through these processes, and that should be true of the budget.
So to respond to that, Commissioner Gamble, and you have not seen this yet, so this
Yeah.
will be brought, or we can bring this to the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee next week. But with the 2027 budget guidelines, what we put together as the 2027 budget goals, and this is based on prior years, is transparency, ensure the process is transparent and communicate budget decisions, data-driven decision-making, use data and evidence to identify most needed government-needed services, prioritize core mandates, and align resources with strategic priorities. And then we talk about the knowns and the unknowns. The COLA increases, step increases are known, COLA increases being unknown. Benefit costs are unknown, and health insurance costs are unknown. And I should add to that also, actually, I have it next under risks. State and federal budget impacts are unknown currently, but increased costs to the county are anticipated.
Yeah.
And then we go into the department budget development process. And then additional questions for the department directors. What is the service you're providing? What outcomes are you seeking to improve? What resources are required? What other resources are being leveraged? How does the request fit into our strategic priorities? And how will this program be sustained over time? So essentially, what are the tails? So we could take the budget goals and share that on our letter too, if that's helpful. But that's what we have so far to send out to the department directors.
Yeah, I think like in this discussion, I think that what you put together there is what the discussion should be relative to moving forward. It's partly addressing defining the budget process, but I'm happy to send you examples of what that includes. I would agree that this is an outline of a number of those elements, but I think we should be having a discussion on the proposed, which you just read to us, because that's foundational to this whole process, if you follow me. Yeah.
So, given the budget calendar that was adopted at the last meeting, we actually stated that we would get the direction out to the department directors on Friday, and haven't, because we really wanted to have this discussion. So we can bring that to the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee next Tuesday, and then get that out at a later.
Friday?
Mhm.
Next Tuesday is the Budget
Yeah,
and
I know,
Facilities.
but you said you were hoping to get this out by Friday. then.
Last
Pre-
Friday. Last Friday.
Oh,
Yeah, was the
Yeah.
deadline.
Yeah.
So I would like to get something out to them to start working on it.
And I would just say that sending it out so that they have that perspective and put that in the context of the budgeting cycle, you know, this year, with the understanding that the board is working on refining this.
Yeah.
Yep, we can
That I
do,
would do that.
we can do that. We can let them know it's a draft and it's
Yeah.
a living, breathing document that might
But
change
in
as we
the
go through
interest
this
of,
process.
as early as
Yes.
possible, give you,
Yep.
you know, I would agree with that.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is we'll leverage the Budget and Facilities Advisory next week to kind of walk through the guidelines and the process and ensure that they support the approach. That all of the agencies that I had mentioned, we will ask them to provide a presentation when we have the budget workshop. And that we'll just formulate letters for each one of the agencies specific to the questions that apply to them and what we need from them. I think that's what I heard. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question is the hub. I mean, again, historically, that has been included in the PHHS grants. Are you wanting a separate, do you want them to go through the PHHS grant process? If not, how do you want to approach that? And then I think, you know, for some of the agencies, there are statutes related to how the funding that can be provided by the county, and I think that was something we were going to look into for the hub as well, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think that's what we need to look at, because we want to make sure we're being consistent.
Yeah.
And because they are a 501c3, I can see if we create that line item, that we're going to have other groups that will approach us.
It's statutorily
Yeah.
a lot. It's even mentioned in a state auditor
Right.
document.
So making sure we have
youth
that.
Centers, the specifics, that's different, but in general, it's allowable.
That's an analysis, in my mind, when you're looking at the big picture, we only have so much money, so if we look at it independent of money, we can, and that's why I say where we find through the year, we get a budget, we approve it, and then we go through the year, we find out we got people coming in, and it's not planned, it's not in our budget, and we get nickeled and dimed to death because we're looking through a single lens at a moment in time and not in the context of the big. So that's why when you have a definition that clarifies, it helps discipline that process, because otherwise, how do you control it? And I'm not saying, I mean, in my experience, I don't know what other, you know, fellow commissioners' experience has been, that there are entities that come in last minute, and we've got to have this approved, and when you say no, because we need time to think on this, and they say, well, no, if you don't do it today, we won't get this. It's sort of a learned behavior, and we have to have a process that allows us to make informed decisions, which we can't be informed at the moment that it's on the agenda. We had never had any prior knowledge of it. So I'm just saying to that issue about coming in, not only is it coming in unaware, and there are circumstances, but it's coming in as a strategy last minute in order to get funding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important we have an application with a deadline and a process that's the same for everyone, to avoid that last minute.
I would agree.
And I come back to our administrator's remarks about the alignment with stated goals and kind of a long-term vision. Does it fit with Cook County government and our strategic plan? And I would add, one thing we haven't talked about is equity. Does the service that's being provided by any of these groups prioritize marginalized or underserved or vulnerable populations? I think that's important data to collect as well for some of these other groups.
And specifically to the hub, I've kind of wrestled with this because, like, I want to support them as,
Yep.
I'm all in. It's a very important organization, but there's the accountability aspect too. If we're just public dollars going to a nonprofit, how do we follow?
Well, this is evidence-based.
Right.
Across anybody, there needs to be evidence that in fact what you are doing has value. The other thing that was important to me is that if I see the resourcefulness of an organization generating their own operational income, that they earn their opportunity, at least that they've demonstrated good stewardship and resourcefulness. Some organizations come in and they just depend on us. and they aren't doing anything to generate revenues. And then they have changeover in leadership constantly, and it's like, why are we giving taxpayer money when we haven't earned your opportunity?
Right now, I feel like there's pretty good stability at the hub. That is not old, that is, I mean, in recent years.
True, and
it's not been
it's
the case.
dependent upon
Yeah.
leadership and,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's part of why I'm like a little leery of it, but I'm trying to,
well, and the other thing I would say is that I'd propose that there needed to be audits for that accountability, and then the entities would say, well, that's gonna cost us a lot more money. I said, if you're getting more than this amount of money from the county, taxpayer dollars, there needs to be a credible audit.
that's kind of.
But it doesn't mean that we as a county can't come along and tutor you, provide information so that your board conducts a credible best practices audit. But it's the accountability factor. And so there's other ways that we can help organizations that aren't necessarily levy dependent. And that's what we need to explore. It's like the conversation about, at the leadership meeting, about creating trust. And we have to look at these things, and that's what, it's like, what is it? It's, with the hub, there's a situation, the lack of funding has created some resourcefulness and creativity on their part to try to contribute more to their existence. And when you see that, that should be noted.
Well, I think because they've had a lot of changes there, to be fair to them, I think they should come again and give a presentation, just like they did last year. And they were in flux and they were trying to write grants. I think they have made progress. In order for us to say, yes, we'll help you, we need to know where are they now. So, in the future.
I agree with that.
just, those
But-
types of.
But the criteria in the
non-mandated.
assessment needs to be based upon our priority and the amount of understanding of the dollars that we have.
So with that, so how we have, my understanding is how we've addressed 503 or 50C3s in the past was that they would go through the PHHS screening
Right, right.
process. And so am I hearing that have them present through that process again?
Well, I don't know about them. I think we need to hear it.
I would agree
I
with
think
that.
we need to hear.
I would,
Yeah.
and this is why stepping back and looking under the umbrella, I said, are we doing it the way we should be doing it? And what drove the decision to do it the way we are doing it? And maybe there's a better way, but that's why I think that overall discussion needs to look at the entities and then decide best way for us to evaluate that with limited dollars. I don't know if that structure makes sense, but what's mandated is one thing, and what's non-mandated is another, and what's 50C3 can be another, and what's, this for subsidizing childcare or businesses allocation, that's another. So now, on the EDA, and I'm not gonna be able to make that meeting, but I wanted to because I think it's gonna be a budget discussion, that in my discussion with Lucas, it sounded like he's gonna say, well, we're gonna just ask for 100,000 this year for that business side of things. And he says, I think you'll like that, but the other thing I'm gonna ask for, I don't think you'll like that. And I don't know what that other thing is. Let's just say that if the ask is $200,000, but we're gonna allocate it, distribute it different ways, it doesn't, what you do with it hasn't changed. It changed, but it doesn't change what happens to us when you're asking for $200,000, that is this past year, totally levy dependent. Yeah.
Yeah, the ask is 100,000 for the small business development grant fund and 100,000 for lack of a better term, opportunity fund, allowing the EDA, allowing our director to build a fund to try to work on larger projects, whether it's for leveraging for grant matches or just even investments to try to do something, rather than just, and then also the change in the business, he's also suggesting a change in the business development fund grant to
50%.
for anything less than $5,000 is just out, and then I guess I heard about the
Yeah, there is, he wants it to be a match, but,
Everything
but I
should
mean,
match.
these are things they're saying is, does that make sense? But it still goes in the context of, when we make a decision to subsidize childcare, when we make a decision to subsidize, give, no interest, no payback to businesses, that's a subjective decision. I don't know the criteria that defines it. And when it comes to us, we're just saying, well, how about, and this is interesting because in the meeting yesterday that we had more on the,
Land
the
services
language
use.
is it's equal application of the rule of the law or equal protection clause. It's who are we protecting with the allocation of our dollars? Equal protection. Are we protecting one entity, be it, business, be it childcare, be it, and the taxpayer can come and say, when are you gonna protect me? And
That's
that's,
our job to communicate what our initiatives are doing, right? Like it's for
well,
the
that's where we have to
community.
see the return on investment on that. But when we see some of these allocations and people are just going, are you kidding me?
So,
Yes.
Anyway.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that the equal protection clause, when it's invoked, you're generally talking about protected classes. So the business decisions that the board makes is a different consideration and certainly affords services and protections for people, but different from the realm of equal protection.
I understand that because it's application there, but those words in proximity, when I heard them, I'm just saying, we have an obligation for equal protection, not in the context of how it's understood in the rule of law, but in principle relative to that it needs to be demonstrated that we are mindful of our community as a whole and the ripple effect of our decisions. Are we protecting and are we mindful of need and the effects of our decisions on everybody?
So I think that's why we're moving towards this process of having the presentations from each one of the departments, so that that information is available to all of you,
Yeah.
so that we can have discussions about what are the mandates, what are the non-mandates, how does that align with the values and the goals and the strategic plan to make as informed of a decision as possible going into 2027. I think we can leverage the Budget and Advisory Committee to review some of the resources that we're developing as we move forward in this process, to get feedback and provide recommendations and information to all of you as well. So I think we're starting to move in the direction that you're requesting, but I know, this is going to be a process as we move forward too.
Right.
No, I agree, and my comments aren't to discourage, my comments are to encourage that we ratchet up and that we have the evidence and the substance that demonstrates to a community that they are good stewards and they are really chewing on this, so that's important.
So this is the first step. We'll evaluate as we go along and tweak it and get an understanding from the departments and from the other areas. So,
That sounds good.
okay?
Can I just
Yep.
say two more things really quickly, and these are just timing discussions. We do have June 8th kind of marked right now as a potential date for our courthouse visioning. And so for our two commissioners, Commissioner White and Commissioner Sullivan, that were engaged in that effort, if you wouldn't mind marking that date on your calendar for now, and we'll get more information out to you soon. And then we're also looking at a date for the transfer station ribbon cutting. So we're reaching out to Jana is reaching out to our representatives to find a date that will work for them. And then we'll work with Dustin and all of you on finding a date for ribbon cutting.
Okay, sounds
I
good.
got
Okay.
to see it yesterday. It's
It
huge. It's
is
massive.
huge. Yeah, it is.
So do we have clarity on the hub process?
No.
Yeah, right now.
Well, if we say that, not if we say that it's under PHHS, then we don't want to overstep what they're doing. So the steps that they take would have to be relevant to their review.
So they have a screening process.
Yeah.
And then they bring a recommendation forward to all of you.
And it's a
So-
very
Yeah.
thorough process. I've participated in it.
So at
Couple
that
of years.
time.
Could we see what that process
Sure.
is?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
It's actually on the website. If you go to PHHS, it's right there.
But we
Okay.
can, I'll forward it to
Why
everyone
don't you
as well.
forward it to all of us, yeah. Okay,
So is that
Um,
the,
yeah.
do we have clarity now? Is that the answer?
I'm just concerned because we're reducing what that total grant
To
amount
150.
is, the 150. And I know the hub's finances are, struggling, and so.
I'm not sure that the structure's right. In other words, where we choose to put that, but I think that, again,
That's
that's.
what I'm
Would
wondering.
would it be
That's
helpful
the over-
for,
That's the overall
To review it?
evaluation to me.
I think it's helpful to review it, and Brady mentioned, statutorily what we can do. It might be good to look at the statute.
Mhm, mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
we can absolutely do that and then have further discussion. I think either way, we can let the hub know that they're going to be in one of the two categories, so they can start prepping their budget, and we'll provide a presentation to either the
And I think-
PHHS board or advisory committee that reviews the applications, or this board.
And I think the important thing to communicate is that we hear, I mean, Commissioner White brings it up, continually, we hear, and I've had conversations with them, and we want to hear, but we're not making any commitment. But on the other hand, we don't want to write them off like we aren't hearing.
And I think we've talked to them about data and collecting information. I think maybe we could do a better job of asking them for very specific data,
Yeah.
letting them know what might be helpful that does align with our
Mm-hmm.
county goals
And I
and
think
our
that's-
strategic vision. And that's where we can do a better job.
And that's why I think that the discussion relative to what it is we ask, if we're going to be evidence-based, then that means, here's the question that need to be asked. Because in my first term, it basically was like a community wanting the Super Bowl in their backyard, and whoever did the best show got the money. So we need to have
The criteria that PHHS has set up is very, very thorough. When Grace was doing that, she just did an outstanding job. And so I feel very comfortable with that process. But again, I think we can do a better job of saying, what are the data points that we would like to see? We have not been specific with that.
And that's honest, that's the intent of this letter and
Right.
following up with all of the agencies to make sure that we're clear on what's the data that we're expecting them to bring forward, making sure that the decisions then are evidence-based, based on their outcomes and how it connects to the strategic plan and
How
the
do they
county
measure it?
priorities.
Yeah.
Yep.
And looking at it, you'll see it in front of you and decide if there's other things, maybe
Yeah.
for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
a step, make it
Yep.
the first
Yep.
step.
Yeah, it won't be perfect this year, but we'll.
It's
we'll
always
get
a
there.
process. 50 years ago, they had probably, yeah, sure, that's all good here. Now, we're not so able to do that anymore, so is there anything else? Otherwise, we are adjourned.
Oh,
Thank
I
you.
would just say
Thank
that
you.
if you want to go online and find out what the legislature did cover under the bonding bill, overall, it's an interesting study when it comes to prioritizing where dollars would go.
Would you like to see what they did?
I did. Oh,
There's a
Wonderful.
lot of
Oh,
info
Oh, my
out there.
gosh, there's a lot
Oh,
more
I didn't
out
see
there.
that.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
on Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.